Well, hello and welcome to our workshop today. I am your host, Shannon Kelly, and I am super excited to be able to connect with you guys and just to talk around the whole idea of the 4 steps to teach your kids how to speak a second language. I'm really excited to share a lot of the tips and the resources and just some of my experience over the last few years, firstly doing it with my own kids, but also then going on to teach preschool French and Spanish in preschools around Australia as well. So I am excited to share some experiences. So let's get started. I want to pop in and I want to show you just a little bit of a presentation that'll kind of give us a bit of a breakdown of what's going to help us today. So as I said, my name's Shannon. I'm from Sydney, Australia. Thank you for taking the time out to join me today. I'm experiencing a little bit of construction noise, which is, let's be honest, is always the case when you start an online workshop. There all of a sudden starts noise anywhere you go, really. So if you can push past that, I think we're going to have just a really robust conversation. I think we're going to get our hands dirty and really find out some really incredible tools. So I know today is going to be great. But thank you. I do appreciate you taking the time to join me today. I know as parents and as educators that oftentimes we don't have free hour to spend wrestling with this. So oftentimes we fly by the seat of our pants. That in Australian terms basically just means that we're so busy we just kind of fumble and make our way through it all. But today is going to be a day where we're actually going to get equipped, and that's what I'm excited for. So thank you for taking the time. You could be anywhere, but you chose to be here. So I'm very grateful for your time. But what I want to talk about today is if this workshop is right for you, because to be honest, we want to make sure that before we dive in for the next hour, we want to actually make sure that it's going to be helpful for you. So you are in the right place if you have preschool age kids and you want to teach them a second language, but you honestly just have no idea where to start. It's a real place, but you're in the right place. If that's you, I'd love to know. Or you might have already started with the basics. You may have started with your numbers. You may have started teaching colours, but you haven't really got a robust plan to move forward on. That this is going to be an incredibly helpful workshop for you today, because I believe that the tools we are providing here today will really empower you to be able to move forward in leaps and bounds. You might also have been fluent in your target language, but you don't speak it much these days. And sometimes the confidence, it's a big one to actually try and dig back into that memory bank and feel like you have everything that equips you to be able to teach it. Because I think for many of us and many of our community, it's one thing to be able to speak a language. It's certainly another thing to be able to teach it. And so this is one of the areas that we're going to be tackling in today. So I'm believing that by the end of today, you're going to have confidence to be able to start, to be able to keep going, and to be able to really build a long structure, a bigger structure that you can actually really support. So that's what my goal is for today. You might also not speak any of the language. If that's you, that was me. That was my experience. If you don't speak the language, you're in good company as well, because if you know that you have a passion to be able to introduce it, then don't be underestimating how important that is actually going to be for your kids. So don't worry, don't get overwhelmed if you don't know it all. You're actually in good stead and you're amongst friends, because many of us, myself included, when I first started, had no real idea about sentence structure and correct pronunciation of particular words at the very beginning of my days. So you are certainly in the right place here today. But last but not least, you want to give your kids a head start. You want to give them a global perspective, and you know that language is a really great starting point. This is going to be an incredible place to start. So I want to welcome you. If that's you in any of those categories, that's you. I want you to feel so welcome here today and know that we're actually going to have a lot of fun. So stay with me. You might be overwhelmed right now with everything on your plate. You may not have any time to create language lessons. You may not even know where to start. And if that's you, join the club. There are many, many of us who are brand new in this community, who are at the very, very starting point of wanting to introduce a language to your kids. So you are in a great place, but you might also be on the other end of the spectrum, and you might be really confident teaching your kids a language, but you might be feeling a little bit stuck along the way, and you're ready to build a plan that'll actually give you some innovation and time to really get excited and breathe some life back into your lessons. Because I know when I first started, just the time that was involved trying to create lessons was overwhelming. So if that's you and you're a little bit stuck, don't worry, you're in good stead. It's going to be great. Because we all want to give our kids a head start in life, and we know that the power of second languages is actually going to be really significant for our kids. So you're in, as I said, you're in the right place. We are all in the same boat, whether we are fluent as a native speaker or whether we are just beginning. But if you're the parent who is fluent in the target language, then that is fantastic. You might consider yourself confident, but you actually need tools and you need strategies, and you need to be able to know what steps you can actually take to teach your kids to speak it for themselves. A lot of native speakers that I know, they really wrestle with the fact that sometimes their kids refuse to speak their target language. And that's a real place, because while your child has loads of exposure to the target language, what they're lacking is either the confidence to be able to speak it with you, or they're lacking the ability to know that other kids are doing it too, and that it's something that they can actually do and be accepted amongst their peers as well. So it's real. But you also may be the parent who may not be fluent, and that certainly comes with challenges of its own as well. You may not be a fluent speaker, but what you lack in skill actually makes up for in passion, and you need just maybe a little bit of help taking your first step and then the next step. And really, for me, one of the biggest challenges was really finding that confidence that I needed to be able to not only help my kids along the way, but really give myself the boost I needed to keep going, and really the encouragement. So if that's you, it's going to be great. We're going to end today and we're going to have that confidence to be able to really build a firm foundation. Now, if you are a preschool teacher, now I know we have a huge community filled with mums who are working mums who homeschool. We have a lot of preschool educators as well, and so I know that we have a lot of educators who are teaching languages in your classroom, or even language or educators who want to be teaching languages in the classroom. And so you're here to try and get some tips as to what that could look like. And you may actually also be an independent language playgroup teacher. And so you might be booking out a library hall where you can come and run your mini lessons in the library. That's how I first started teaching my language programs, was in the library. And then we graduated also to a preschool classroom. So if you're a preschool educator, this is going to be incredibly helpful for you. One thing I know that actually spills out across all of our, whether you're a preschool language teacher, whether you are a parent, whether you homeschool or you work full time, I find that the ongoing challenge to create regular age-appropriate language lessons that inspire your little ones can actually be incredibly exhausting. And I know that for me, that was my biggest challenge when I first started, was knowing where to start. That's amazing. Trying to work out all of the research and trying to work out language lessons and plans and really kind of knowing how to build from there. this is all before we've even actually started a class. And so I know for me that the biggest challenge is oftentimes actually getting a plan in place and building on that before the language plans even start. So I don't know, hands up if any of you have found that overwhelming at times, knowing that you want to start and you may have bought some books along the way and you started with some books, and then maybe you've found some music, and that's fantastic because music's great, but it's your lessons may be a bit sporadic. You're not really sure if there's the bigger picture plan in place. And when you sit down at the end of the day, whether you're working with kids full time or whether you're raising kids full time, it can actually be incredibly overwhelming to go, how on earth do I even start to integrate languages at the same time? So I understand the challenges that come with that. The thing is, though, is that every single child has the potential to learn multiple languages with ease. And so regardless of whether they were born in an environment where they're raised in multilingual environments, like in a lot of our European countries, where your child's exposed to it, or if your kids are anything like mine and they grow up in a predominantly English-speaking society where access to the target language is really, really minimal, then it's our job to actually give them the head start that they need, because the power of languages is significant. And if you've actually taken some time to actually look at some of the benefits of bilingualism and what happens when kids are introduced to a second language from a really young age, is you'll find that it actually gives our kids an enormous head start when it comes to social skills, cognitive benefits, mental capacity. And I'm going to touch on those topics a little bit later on. But suffice to say that regardless of where you grow up in or what environment your child is raised in, your child has the incredible ability to learn to speak not just one or two, but multiple languages if given the right environment. So it is possible, even if you don't speak the language. For me, I found that when I first started with my own kids, it was an incredibly isolating experience. And I don't know if your story is anything like mine, and I'll touch on a little bit of my story a little later on. But you might be feeling isolated from your friends, from your family. They may not even understand why you would even think to teach your kids a language. I had family who used to mock me and used to laugh at me at the thought that I would be able to try and teach my kids a language. And so while their kids never picked up one, slowly but surely, my revenge was that my kids were actually starting to speak. And that was the greatest and sweetest benefit of it all. But if you're like me, that you're feeling isolated because there's not a lot of people in your world who have the same values or believe in the same things or even doing the same things, then it's actually a really real thing. And so my goal out of this workshop is to really help you to feel like you're a part of a much bigger community and really get connected to other like-minded parents along the way. So stay with me, because at the end of this workshop, I'll be able to point to where you can actually get connected and really start to get to know some like-minded mums along the way as well. Now today, before we dive in, I am super excited. Our 4-step fail-proof method to teach your preschooler a second language is going to be starting in just a minute. And so I am really passionate about this subject. I'm passionate about it not just because I want my kids to learn a language, but that basically came from the fact that I was given the unique benefit of being able to learn German when I was a child. And so I know from a child growing up now to being able to speak a language as an adult, I know that that was an incredibly empowering experience for me. And I know the importance, and I've been able to experience the benefits that have come with that investment when I was a child. So I know today is going to be practical, but it's going to be inspiring today, because the idea is that this is not just something we decide and all of a sudden our kids are fluent. This is a process and it's a journey. But as we start this journey, I know that it's going to be a really rich one for you. So stay tuned for what's in store. I'm going to help teach you how to fast track your kids' language learning and to really help you get running regular lessons at home. And I'm not just talking about you running a few lessons here and there. I'm talking about lessons that your kids will love. Many of you will attest that that idea of lessons and love don't often go hand in hand, because the idea of a language lesson often looks like grammar and just pushing vocabulary down there in their minds. And to be really honest, they get overwhelmed. We get overwhelmed. It's not a fun process. And so I want to take that whole idea of really forcing a language onto our kids and throw it away. Because today I really want to talk about really how we can actually inspire our kids, and really the idea that our kids can play their way to fluency, because the reality is that kids learn best when they're having fun. And so I want to dive into how we can marry fun and play and learning really into the same unique language lessons today. Now, many of you are probably wondering, who is this girl? Why is she talking to me today? What gives her even the grounds to be able to speak to me on this topic? My name is Shannon Kelly, and it is a pleasure to be here today and to actually spend some time with you. I am the founder of The Cultured Kid. We are a company that introduces preschool French and Spanish and other languages we're in the works with, but we introduce currently preschool French and Spanish language lessons. And these are created to be able to teach online to your kids wherever you are. But I'll be talking about that much later on today. For me, my language journey started when I was in primary school and elementary school, and it was a really interesting adventure. I had the unique ability to be able to go and learn German, and my parents were not German speakers. I grew up in a purely English speaking home. I grew up in an predominantly English community. In Australia, we are, as you can tell, I'm Australian. I have a very thick Australian accent. But in Australia, we don't have the same unique opportunities to be able to be introduced to other languages. And so when I was in school, it was such an incredible opportunity to be able to get connected to a different culture that I'd never heard of. And I loved it. I loved languages. I loved culture. I loved being able to dig in deep and get to know new words and new vocabulary. And there was a certain sense of empowerment of being able to, as a child, being able to speak a completely different language. And it was also a little bit of fun being able to actually speak a language to my siblings, and they had no idea exactly what I was saying. So that was a lot of fun. But having fast forwarded a few years, when I was in high school, I had the enormous privilege of being able to go to Germany on an exchange program. And it was here that it really broadened my horizons. And it was here that I actually became fluent in German. And so I think my experiences here of finally being able to speak fluently in a different language were really, really special for me. And I can recall one story when I was 15 years old and I'm literally on the other side of the world with no parents, no family. And I remember staying with a host family, and we would go to school every day. And this one day I decided not to come home with the host family. I decided to see if I could test out to see how good my German was. And this was really cool / terrifying, because not only did I get on a bus and go all the way into the center of the city, but I wrestled with whether or not I would actually have the capacity to be able to speak enough German to be able to get home. And so I really dived into the deep end. But what was amazing here was not only did I go to the city, and not only was I able to get home, but I came back with a confidence that I'd never experienced before. I came back with my chest puffed out because I was so proud of what I was able to achieve. And see, this story actually has shaped my lives for decades to come since that day, because now I've realized that not only can I learn a different language, not only can I connect with people literally from the other side of the world, but it's given me the confidence to realize that anything is actually possible. And as a child growing up, realizing that anything is possible is actually one of the most incredible, empowering things you can teach your child and show them. So that's a little bit of my story. I grew up, I've got two small kids, and when they were 1 and 2, we moved to New York City. And it was a wild adventure. My adventure basically had us growing up in this melting pot of language and culture. I remember going to our local playgroup with my little kids. I've got a boy and a girl, and we would go, and there would be Spanish speakers everywhere. And so a lot of the parents would have to go to work, and so a lot of the carers were all Spanish and Mexican and beautiful Latinos. And so we would go to these play groups because I was one of the only English speakers, and we would be immersed in this language and get to know them and talk and learn new words. And it was beautiful. It was a beautiful experience. But what I discovered also was that only after a couple of years of being in New York and being in this melting pot of language, we moved back to Sydney and realized that we didn't have the same exposure to the language. We didn't have the same opportunities that this cultural melting pot enabled us in New York. And so for me, my biggest challenge was that I really wanted to be able to find a way to be able to continue the language learning process for my own kids. And this is where the rubber hits the road for me. I had no idea how to teach my own kids. I knew how to speak German. I was exposed to that. It was amazing. I loved being able to speak it. But it's a little bit different when you are all of a sudden thrust as the teacher and kind of going, what am I doing? How do I do this? And so I had to dive in and learn to dive in to be able to trial and error, try and teach my kids how to speak French. So we decided to speak French and learn French. And so it was this game of learning how to learn a few new words and then teaching it to my kids and then trying to learn a few more words, etc. But what I discovered was that I didn't have what it takes at the time. My kids weren't interested at all. I was trying to force the process. It was not fun at all. But then one day I just decided that I was going to do a little bit of research. And so I'll get on to a little bit more of this story a little bit down the track. But yeah, a little bit of my story comes into now we run language programs all across Sydney. And so now we run language programs all across the world as well. Because from the early days of starting in the four walls of my own home and trial and erroring and wrestling and failing, and then really trying to work out, what do I need to do? How do I make this work? I went into this period where I actually went and started researching and studying and really diving in deep and working out the best ways that kids learn a language. And so we got some really incredible runs on the board, and long story short, we ended up starting a kids language program in our local neighborhood, which is how we first initially decided to start in the local library. And then my daughter's preschool found out that we were going to be running language lessons in the library. And then fast forward, they asked if we would run language programs in their preschool. And so all of a sudden, it all kind of happened very, very quickly, that all of a sudden we started in my daughter's preschool, and we started with preschool French, and it was lots of fun. And then I had one of my best friends who was a native French speaker, had her coming in, and she would actually do all of the vocabulary, and we would have lots of games, and the kids, they actually had a blast. And it wasn't long before all of a sudden we were running and doing, in the first 6 months, we were doing 8 centers in 6 months, and it was amazing. We quickly picked up preschool Spanish, and we had Spanish speakers running them. And honestly, it was going so fast. But I think it was the first time I realized that there was such a huge demand, that it wasn't just me who wanted my kids to learn French, or it wasn't just the centers who wanted their kids to learn Spanish. I realized that after chatting with the parents after classes and talking to the preschools, that there was such a huge need to be able to expand language lessons in preschools, at home. Mums and dads wanted to be able to get in and actually help reinforce the language that they were learning at preschool. And so I realized that being able to run our lessons week in and week out at preschool were great, but they were only going to help a very small number of people when it came to how many people really wanted the programs. So over the last couple of years, we have spent a lot of time and energy and effort really pouring our resources into creating language programs that you as a parent can run at home and that you as an educator can actually run within your preschool as well. And so I'll show you a little bit more about that a little bit later, but this is a little bit of my background. We've been running the Culture Kid now for over 6 years in Sydney, and we're having a ton of fun, and we have an incredible team of educators and language experts, and I can't wait to share a little bit more of that. But this is, again, a little bit of my story. Over 6 years ago, I had no idea what I was doing. None. And if that's anything like my story is the same for you, then you understand it can be a little overwhelming. You may know a lot of the language, but actually experience teaching the language is another thing altogether. And so when I first started, I realized that it was actually up to me to teach everything. And I realized it was up to me to decide which topics to teach and how I was going to teach it, and to hunt for all of the resources online. And if you're anything like me and Pinterest, like, you get overwhelmed. There's amazing resources on Pinterest, but to know where to start, my goodness me, it's like insane. But I knew I wanted my kids to learn a language. I did. I knew the benefits. And so I knew that if I was going to do it, I had to start today. And I knew I had to start and really push through those fears to be able to keep going and build that firm foundation for them. So what's the option? Just keep going, right? I wanted my kids to understand that learning a language could actually be one of the most fun times of their week. See, I had the privilege of being a stay-at-home mum when my kids were born. So I used to work a long time ago, full-time in media. But when my kids came along, I actually wanted to spend time with them, and I had the opportunity to be able to raise them. And so I got to be at home, I got to play with them, I got to adventure with them. And our days in New York were really spent adventuring the streets of Manhattan and going and checking out museum exhibitions and going and showing them cultural art displays. And so for me, I knew what my kids loved. I knew how they loved to engage with things. I knew what made them smile. I knew what they wanted to spend their days doing. And so I knew that with our languages, we had to actually find ways to make it fun, because I know that if kids are having fun, they're actually going to learn. I wanted my kids to have the same access to languages as the same opportunities that I did when I was a child. And so because of that, I knew that if I was able to impart the same gifts that my parents had done for me when I was a child, that they would not only have increased opportunities in life, but they would also dream bigger. And I know that in an interconnected world that we're living in these days, I know as the world gets smaller and smaller, that it was going to be important that my kids were connected with what happens in the world and knew about the differences with people and celebrated them rather than stuck with the only things that were familiar to them. It was my job as a parent to really broaden their horizons. I wanted to understand my kids, their world was bigger than the four walls of their neighborhood. We live in a really little village pocket within I live in the center of Sydney, but we live in this really little pocket that is it's beautiful, but it's very Australian. And I think for me, I knew that if my kids were able to their world was going to be framed by their environment. And so for me, being able to expand their horizons through language and through culture was significantly important in their development as they grew up. And so while their neighborhood is amazing and we love where we live and we adventure all of the time, I know that not everybody has the same abilities to travel. Hello, wouldn't it be nice to travel like every other week and go adventuring to these different countries? So this was our way of being able to bring it into the four walls of our own home as well. As I mentioned, I started researching. I Googled, I studied, I read every single book you could imagine on the best ways that kids actually learn languages. I did amazing TESOL courses. I basically dove in so deep and studied my way so that my kids would get the very, very best of me. And then we trialed and errored a lot of our lessons with my own kids. And the thing is, I discovered something that completely changed everything. I discovered that when my kids were playing, when my kids were engaging and having fun with their lessons, they actually wanted to do them. And not only do they want to do them, they would come up to me during the day and ask to do their French lessons. They would ask to read their French books. They had this lean in that I'd never ever really seen before. And so that's when you realize that when kids learn best when they're having fun, and play is the best way to teach it. It changes your whole approach to focus. You focus on play and you focus on inspiring and engaging, and it's an invitation to play in the language. And that's when I really did start to see some dramatic results going forward. I created some lessons that involve physical games, because if your kids are anything like mine, they do not sit still ever. We talked about the culture of France. We read some amazing books, just helping them to understand more about that part of the world. I created some really beautiful flashcards because I had a friend who was an incredible illustrator. And so we started with our own flashcards just purely so I could introduce them to my own kids. And then we started using them in our play groups. And because they were beautiful and because they were embracing childhood and they were fun and there were these beautiful little animated illustrated characters, the kids loved them and they wanted to play with them, and we started to see our kids really falling in love with all things French. It was during these lessons with my kids that actually I talked about I started a play group. And so this is how the Cultured Kid was started, and our preschool is running them. And now we have preschools literally all over the world who are running our language programs and are really have the ability to be able to start languages in their center, regardless of whether they have full curriculums or not. We've actually given them the tools to be able to start that process as well. So that's been a really special thing that we could actually share not only my experiences with our local community, but now our experiences are really reaching the four corners of the globe. So it's pretty amazing. But this is why it was important, because if kids love their lessons, it actually would create a strong foundation for them to build on. And I can't emphasize how important that is, because I know for me, if I have a bad experience with something, it's not going to inspire me to want to do it ongoingly. It's just not. For me, I want my kids to be able to have fond memories of their French days. I want them to look back on the ideas of learning a language with great joy and look back and go, wow, I loved it. I want to do more of it as an adult and as they grow up. So we have the opportunity to create an incredible foundation. And so that's exactly what I'm looking at doing here today. I touched on before some of the benefits that come with actually learning language from a really young age. And why this is important is because studies coming out of the University of Washington are showing that the best time to learn a language is before the age of 7. And why that's important is because most countries, most schools don't start languages until until high school. If you're lucky, your primary school or your elementary school will have a language program. But what I'm discovering through conversations with parents and preschools and education facilities is that most kids don't have these opportunities until much later in life. And so what's happening is we're missing out on this incredible opportunity while our kids are really, really young. See, what happens inside a child's brain is that there is this incredible window of opportunity that really experiences it's an incredible opportunity that really helps a child learn a language while they're young. And so what that opportunity really does is it really helps kids pick up So they have this ability to be able to hear pronunciation incredibly well. They develop this hearing. So when they hear vocabulary spoken, when they hear pronunciation, they have this unique ability to be able to replicate it with ease. And so oftentimes you'll find that if adults learn a language when they get older, they can speak the language fluently, but they have this accent. They have like a non-native accent. Whereas kids who learn a language from a really, really young age, they are able to speak without an accent. They sound like they're native speakers, which is pretty remarkable if you think about it. And not only do they have that ability to connect and sound like a native, they also have this ability to score higher on standardized tests, because what's happening in a child's brain is that you're literally adding another layer of language and learning into a child's brain. So they're learning a language while they're learning English. The brain just seems to sort it out, which is pretty remarkable. So they score higher on standardized tests. They have a greater cognitive awareness, a better memory, a greater awareness of the world. They have an increase in problem solving. I haven't written it down here, but they do have higher levels of creativity as well. And so this is just like a handful of some of the benefits that come from actually introducing language to our kids really, really young. But the thing is if we don't teach our kids before they go to school, they're actually going to miss out. And it's funny because a lot of my friends who don't share the same convictions about introducing a language young, it's really sad, because their kids are going to grow up, but they're not necessarily going to have the same levels of access and the same levels of opportunity when it comes to cognitive and brain benefits along the same way as well. I could finally stop wasting my energy and my efforts. And once we've worked all of this out and worked out what works and how we can move forward, I was able to actually start to understand what worked with my own kids. And it was a foundation that we were able to build on and build great success. And so now that's what I get to do with my days. It is a privilege and an honor to be able to now partner with parents and with children literally from all over the world. And I love seeing my own two kids here. They have grown up and now they love French. They're now learning Italian at school. And I am convinced, without a shadow of a doubt, that my kids now have strength in their Italian studies because of the foundations that we had introduced when they were really, really young. So welcome to my family. And this is a little bit of what we get to do now in our days. But the reality is, when kids are happy, they actually naturally lean into any activity you introduce to them. And if it's something that makes them smile, they're actually going to want to do them. So that's a great place to start. Now, before we dig right in, there are a couple of things to keep in mind. Many of you might be thinking, this is all well and good, but I actually don't speak the language. And I want to ensure and remind you that you don't actually have to be fluent to teach a language to your child. Yes, it helps. Absolutely, it helps. But a lot of our community are not fluent, and a lot of our community don't have the same advantages as being able to speak a second language fluently. But what it is okay is, it's okay to use proven resources to help you get started. So I just want to wipe that preconceived notion that you can't do it because you're not fluent. Don't worry about it. We're here to help you take that step and keep going. Now, one of my first tips out of the 4 tips that I want to share with you today is, I want you to start with one word. Okay, this is important. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Step number 2, I want you to make it fun. Tip number 3, I want you to create an environment of exposure. And tip number 4, have reasonable expectations. Now, starting with tip number 1, start with one word. This is really important because I think it's really easy to think that one word is not really going to help a language. And I want to say to you, if this is how you felt at the very beginning, I want you to know, don't underestimate small beginnings. And this is important because one word, imagine you spoke one word each day, you taught one word each week. Imagine after the space of a year, your child would have over 300 different vocabulary words. And I think the studies reveal something like you only need about 300 words or so to be able to really start to have a little bit of a conversation and be able to connect. So imagine just one word a day, what is possible with that. There are some incredible resources on how you can actually introduce a word. So even really little things like you can label items. I know a family who is introducing Spanish to their child, but they're only English speakers. They're learning it with their child at the same time. And they put little sticky note labels all over the house at the moment while they're still building up that level of repetition and exposure. And so every time they go into the kitchen, they go to the fridge and they open it up and they see there's the sticky note with the name of the fridge in Spanish on it. And so everywhere they go, they start to see it. And when they see it, it prompts a recalling of the name. And so you're constantly, repetitively reinforcing new vocabulary week in and week out. Language flashcards are an amazing resource and one that I use pretty regularly to be able to introduce vocabulary to my own kids at home as well. And so being able to regularly see and repeat the vocabulary is a really great tool as well. So start with language flashcards as well if you can get your hands on some, or even create some of your own. There are some amazing apps online where you can actually create your own flashcards as well. You can read books. And now books is proven to be an incredible way to expand your child's vocabulary. So there are plenty of bilingual books on the market as well. So you have the ability to be able to read the French, for example, and then understand what it's saying because the English is right there side by side. So you can introduce vocabulary that way. You can use visual aids. You can even use TPR, which is total physical response. And what this looks like is, for example, when we're singing songs with our kids, for example, it could look like doing physical responses that communicate what the word actually means. So you could say hola and do a wave, for example, or you could talk about going to sleep and then doing actions of physical responses that actually directly connect the word with the association. Again, total immersion is always the most amazing way to introduce core vocabulary. So even if it's just a word at a time at home, or you have the ability to be able to immerse a little bit more, that's still a fantastic starting point. So I would encourage you, if you have the ability to start with one word, don't despise the benefits of just one word a day. So it's a great starting point. I would also say to be patient because, as I said, it can be frustrating thinking that you're putting all of this work and energy and investment into introducing language. But if you're getting runs on the board with one word a day, then that is fantastic and you need to celebrate that. So patience, there's a lot to be said for it. Make it fun. Now, this was a lesson I had to learn really, really early on when I was teaching my kids, and one that we really have doubled down on with our language classes within our preschool centres as well. This is important because quality trumps quantity every time. Now, imagine you have a language lesson and it's boring, but there's lots of them. Whereas imagine you've got a short language lesson, but it's really, really fun. You're going to realize pretty quickly, and your child's really going to let you know which one they want to do and which one that they're more engaged with. And so the whole idea is that kids learn best when they're having fun. And as I said, play is the best way to teach them. So creating quality lessons really sculpted around what your kids really love is going to be an important part of the language learning process. So your kid, if your kids love singing, for example, music is going to be a perfect way to excite them, inspire them. They may love dancing, and so you might be able to find some language music in the target language where it's really boppy so that they can dance and they can have fun and have little dance parties. You need to take the pressure off your child to have to speak all the time. And this is really important, particularly for our kids who are really quite young, because there can be a lot of pressure for your child to have to perform. And as a parent, you want to start to see results. So it's easy if you're not seeing your child regularly speaking the language, it's easy to want to switch off and say, yep, no, not doing this anymore, giving up, or pushing it harder to actually make them speak. That's never a good idea when it comes to languages with our kids, especially because for many kids there is a silent period where they can actually not necessarily speak any vocabulary, and then by the age of 2, all of a sudden they spurt out like hundreds of new words almost a week. So it's really important that just because they're not necessarily speaking it does not mean it's not going in. And so if you can make your lessons fun and engaging and keep that foundation of enjoyment as priority, it's going to go a long way to actually making sure that your kids are set up for it, they love it, and they're actually going to want to speak later on down the track. And then I would say be flexible and watch your child engage with the language. Because as you start a lesson, you start with something that you know that they love, but watch where they go with it. That you may be introducing clothing vocabulary, and they may want to go into their bedroom and do dress ups, for example. There are lots and lots of different ways to continually engage our kids. We don't have to be so rigid that this is the lesson, this is what it has to look like, and the child has no say in the matter. No, this is a partnership, and this is you watching to see how you can engage your child and inspire them. And as they take a step in this direction, how we can constantly find ways to be able to continue what they're interested in as well. So it's a beautiful partnership that really does go hand in hand. Creating an environment of exposure. I love this one, and this is an incredibly important one. Access to the second language is going to be vital. Okay. And so for all of our native speakers, you definitely have an advantage when it comes to being able to create a level of access to the language because you speak the language naturally. So your child, if you're regularly speaking the target language to them in your native tongue, then your child is going to hear it more, they're going to pick it up more, and they're going to have more access to hearing more vocabulary in the correct context. Now, for our families who don't have the same level of access to fluency, don't worry, there are so many ways that you can actually counteract that as well. And what's important to remember is that you don't have to teach them everything. The responsibility is not going to have to be solely on your shoulders to teach them every bit of the language vocabulary. I think it's important to remember that as parents, our job is to create an environment for them. And so if they're surrounded by an environment that is conducive to language learning, guess what? They're going to pick up the language and they're going to want to engage more. And so there are many, many ways to be able to do this, even if you don't speak the language. But even if you do, it's incredible how many different ways kids learn. So whether or not you can have play-based language lessons, I know for me, we didn't have the same access to French playgroups when my kids were little. And so I wasn't able to go and take them to a playgroup where they would be interacting. If you're lucky enough to have them in your neighborhood, I would highly recommend them because they are fantastic ways to be able to engage your kids with other kids who are learning a language as well. And they're just fantastic. They're fantastic ways to be able to, again, have more fun with your kids. If you don't have a playgroup access, you can certainly run them at home as well. And so both are fantastic ways to continually expose your child to a language. You can, as I said earlier, we can do music in the target language. These are great. There are amazing playlists out there with fantastic French and Spanish kids music as well. And so why that's important is that kids are actually hearing it, they're engaging, they're dancing with it, they're having so much fun. But we also have, if you head to our Spotify account, if you go to the Cultured Kid on Spotify, you'll be able to find that we've set aside some playlists on Spotify in French and Spanish that you can actually go and access and listen to regularly. So if you don't have anything at home, you can go and find them on our Spotify account, but they are lots of fun. And also TV and video programs are a really great place to continue as well. And so whether you can find something on YouTube, they can be hit or miss. So you really do want to make sure that what you're getting is going to be quality TV programming, because YouTube can be interesting at times. You can find movies on Netflix, but what I would encourage you to do is to actually find vocabulary that they're going to have regularly and repetitively, and they're going to hear it and engage and connect with it. But also seeing the context of it is an incredibly important thing. So cartoons are great, but even when you're seeing live interactions, being able to see a person's mouth is helpful as well. So that's a great point to be aware of as well. And also, as we've mentioned earlier, books are a fantastic way. So being able to get amazing books, whether that's on Amazon or whether that's online through bilingual books, for example, being able to create exposure to the language is important. And so even moving forward with how you create access to the language, a lot of us have come from different backgrounds. A lot of us have different varying levels of ability to be able to have time to run these lessons as well. And so what I would encourage you to do is run them as often as you can, but also be realistic about how often you have the ability to engage your child in the target language. And so if you only have a small ability, maybe throughout the week, if you have a babysitter coming in, or you have your ability to have a nanny, for example, maybe finding somebody who speaks that language can actually provide an additional support level as well. But be realistic, because whatever you can do is better than none at all. And so I would rather you start small and build up to it than aim for the stars and feel really discouraged because you weren't able to do as much as probably what you would have liked. So it's a good point to be aware of. And as I said before, point number 4 is have reasonable expectations. See, one thing that's important to realize is that we have so much time on our side. And that's the beauty of when we start, when our kids are young. We don't have to teach them it all overnight. The most important thing that we can actually do for our kids is actually be realistic about what we can do. And so being able to introduce our kids to a language, start from here and slowly build up to it's fantastic. So be realistic with the time that you have and start small. I would also say to be very patient. It is a marathon journey. This is not a sprint. The danger if we sprint is that we jam too much and we overload our kids and we overload ourselves. And all of a sudden, the pressure to perform and the pressure to work these lessons into our kids' lives gets overwhelming. And for me, when I get overwhelmed, everything in me just wants to put my duvet over my head and peace out, I'm out. And so if this is your experience, don't get overwhelmed. Realize that time is on your side. I talked about silent periods and realizing that your child's not always going to speak it all as soon as you've taught it. That's okay. What you need to be focusing on is input and getting as much input as possible. If you can partner consistency with encouragement, you'll be mind blown at what you can actually achieve over time. Now, weekly lessons. Now, this is where I wanted to show you a little bit of what we do in terms of our structure, so you can have a little bit of an example of what that looks like for us as well, and maybe you can get inspired about what that could look like for you as well. But for us, this will also have an opportunity to be able to see an in-depth breakdown of what our lessons look like. And for us, we created a 12-month language curriculum as well that we run both in our preschools, and we also run with parents as well who are teaching French and Spanish. So if at the end of this presentation, this is something that you might be interested in, I'd love to give you the opportunity to become a member as well. But basically, our curriculum is a 12-month done for you language curriculum. And why this is being created really is to really create a plan that our educators can build off, that our parents can build off, and really it takes the stress and the pressure out of having to pre-plan and organize and do all of the research behind it all. The best part about it is you actually will never wonder what you need to teach now. You actually know. And so this is a little bit of a breakdown of what some of the lessons and the language topics that we cover in our lessons. So I don't know what your lessons look like, but obviously we cover actions and animals, numbers. You can see there's all of the foundational topics that we like to start with. But we also talk about things like feelings. We do school because it's always great to have conversations about school and exposing our kids to what school could be like as well. We provide birthday and Christmas, and we're also in the process of creating some beautiful culture lessons as well that introduce all of the culture of certain countries as well. So the kids don't just learn vocabulary, they actually have the opportunity to learn all about the culture and get to see different parts of the world. So that's a lot of fun. Our lessons over the last few years have evolved. And so I think, like I'd mentioned to you earlier, when we first started, we were in preschools and we were running a lot of physical location centers. And so over the last little while, we've created some beautiful video lessons that really introduce the core vocabulary from a really young age, but they are really custom designed to work with kids under the age of 7. And so all of our lessons include real life context. They introduce language through immersion. So we don't do translation in any of our vocabulary lessons. And that's important to know because when kids are introduced to the language, they have this ability to be able to pick up a language and they hear it and they see the context and they can marry the two together. And so why this helps is it removes the process of translation, which enables kids to actually pick it up a lot faster because there's almost one less step involved in introducing and processing the vocabulary. We've created 12 months worth of play-based lesson plans and scripts. And so all of our lessons are really structured around play, around everything that we've talked about, really fun, engaging games that really get the kids up and running around and are active. And really, they're beautiful ways to be able to connect. And with our parents program, they are structured so it's like a one-on-ones or one to a couple. So if you've got siblings, they can do it too. And our daycare center program is also one to many. So it's a lot more small group based. So regardless of your settings and regardless of whether you actually speak the language, you can see in our lesson plans that we include all of the vocabulary, but we also include lesson scripts. And this is important because that way, even if you don't know the translation, you've got the English translation side by side, and you've also got the phonetic pronunciation. And that is important because if you were anything like me, when I first started teaching French, my pronunciations were not fantastic. And kids need to hear correct pronunciation. And so while they hear native speakers in our video lessons, it's important to be able to keep reinforcing it. And so we are not only teaching your kids how to speak a language, but we're actually also helping you along the way. So it's a really great resource for you to be able to do it together. These are some of our beautiful flashcards that I've created as well. So I talked about them, about how we first started with our own kids. And we use these because they are really, really, okay, they're beautiful. I have a soft spot for really beautifully well-designed things for kids. And in particular, to be able to create something for my own kids that are going to inspire them. Again, this goes back to the idea of creating beauty and an invitation to a whole new culture, and showcasing them something that's going to inspire them and want them to connect with their language and their lessons. So you can see about these are our French flashcards, our French numbers flashcards, and they are two-sided. And so as you can see, on one side you have the French, where you can see the French is 10. And then on the other side, you have the English translation, because that's helpful for you to know if you're a parent. But we also have in the brackets there, we also have the phonetic pronunciation. So you can be all super clever and you can hold your flashcard up to your children, showing them the French, and they will learn that it is 10. But on the flip side, you've got a cheat card so you can actually pronounce it correctly as well. So everything we do really does go a long way to helping mums and dads and educators really set you up for a win. So these are some of the resources that I've created as well. And I would say a lot of our program looks essentially like this. So we've got 52 language lesson plans. So this is a little bit of what our structured curriculum looks like over the whole course of a year. We've created over 4 hours of immersive language videos. And honestly, the process of creating them was actually incredibly fun. So if you've ever popped into our Instagram stories, you can see on one of the stories that you can see a little bit of the behind the scenes of how we created them and what they look like. But the whole idea is with our videos is that it introduces real life context. It introduces real life kids. It introduces all of our flashcards, and we include animation. But the important thing to note is at the end of every video, we use a call and response feature. And so rather than your kids sitting down and watching an episode on YouTube, what this does is it encourages them to speak. And that's important, because if your kids are speaking the language, they're using pronunciation, it's going in, it's like repetition, it's fantastic. And that's oftentimes one of the biggest challenges. We've created over 200 phonetic flashcards and over 100 age-appropriate activity sheets as well. And plus, inside our program, we also provide a lot of training and support and connection along the way. So this is a little bit of the structure and the breakdown of what we're currently using at the moment. And some of you may be asking, how much would it be? Because that would be amazing. If that's you, I know that a lot of our programs, we actually don't sell our language curriculums out to the public. We run a lot of them in our daycare centres, and we run a membership site. So basically, we offer our language lessons purely as a subscription-based service. So if you're wondering how you can actually get your hands on our lessons, so that's one less thing you have to do week in and week out, I want to share you a little bit behind the scenes of what that looks like as well, because our curriculums are actually valued at over $1,000 with detailed lesson plans and 4 hours of immersive language videos and flashcards and activity sheets and lesson scripts and community support. It's a lot, I know. But the thing I want to share with you here is it's actually valued at $1,000, but we offer our entire curriculum to the members within the Cultured Kids Club. And so this is something that if you're interested in introducing French or Spanish to your kids today, you actually have an opportunity today to become a member of the Cultured Kids Club if that's what you'd love to do. What is the Cultured Kids Club? Well, the Cultured Kids Club is a pay-as-you-go monthly subscription plan for parents and preschool teachers. So each week you will receive step-by-step lesson plans done for you, curriculums and practical support offered through an affordable, really affordable monthly membership to help preschoolers, your preschoolers, learn a second language. And so this is why we've actually created and packaged and created our programs this way. For me, back in the days when I was teaching in our preschool locations, it was really important to me that our kids, not just my kids, but our kids had the same access to languages as possible. but there was really only so much I could actually do to teach other kids. And so for me, my passion is actually seeing as many kids as possible, literally from all over the world, have the same access to language lessons as they possibly can. And so for me, my goal is that it would be affordable, that it wouldn't be this huge dollar figure that most parents couldn't ever afford, but it would be an affordable rate that if it comes down to actually less than $1 a day to be able to access our language program. So I want to share with you a little bit of what they're structured like and what that could look like for you as well. So the Culture Kid, as I said, each month you receive all of the resources that I've just shown you, and basically everything you'll need to be able to run your own lessons as well. And again, like I said, if you don't speak the language, this is actually perfect for you, because this is just a quick screenshot. You'll see where you see the little image of a little girl in a cot. You'll see that in the video lesson, it actually says the Spanish over the top, but in the lesson script, you actually get a breakdown of what everything is, English and phonetic as well. So it's really, really easy for you to pick up as well. And so this is a beautiful comment that I got from Laura Coleman. She's one of our members that she sent me during our last intake, and she said, doing the first lesson, and they're amazing. I was wondering if they'd be too simple, as we already speak Spanish to our kids, but they're so good, and the lesson plans are great, and my daughter so enjoyed the flashcards. Thank you for putting together such a fantastic resource. I can't wait for all the coming units. Laura's amazing. She's a non-native Spanish speaker, but she learnt Spanish in high school, and so she has wanted to continue introducing Spanish to her girls. And so, yeah, she's doing an amazing job, but it just goes to show you don't have to be a native speaker, but even if you do speak a lot of the language, the program is actually going to be helpful for your kids. Now, when you join the Cultured Kids Club, what you're actually joining is not just getting a language lesson in your inbox each month. What you're joining is a community filled with supportive, like-minded parents and educators. And why that matters is that it means that you're actually not going to be lonely anymore. I know for me, when I first started with my kids, I didn't have anybody to talk to. I didn't know how to ask questions or where to go to when I got stuck, or really somebody who was doing the same journey as me. And so this is important, because our Cultured Kids Club will create an environment where you can actually get to know people who are doing the same language, who are also have kids who are the same age as yours. So it's really, really, you're never going to be alone. Rebecca sent me this the other day, and it's actually really encouraging. She said, I'm Rebecca and I have 3 girls, Madison, Leah, and Allison, 10 months. So 7, 2, and 10 months. I'm starting to homeschool Madison this fall, grade 2. And I'm excited to start language learning with her. And as her private school did not offer any, I want to start with easy basics, a word a day or a week, depending on how well she does with it in both Spanish and sign language. We are native English speakers, and I have a little French and sign. My husband has a little Spanish. I figure my 2-year-old will absorb a lot of what we do as well as the baby, and they continue to be exposed. Thank you for your plans. They help calm me down when I feel inadequate about not actually knowing what to teach. It's a real place, honestly. I still remember back in the days when I first started, and I just had no idea, but I wanted so much for my kids. And so I think it's easy to be overwhelmed. And I think, honestly, what happens when we get overwhelmed is we just stop. And so my desire, my heartfelt desire, is that our language curriculum would be created so you could actually start introducing a language to your kids, and you can keep going, and you can have fun and engage your kids. And it really builds that foundation that you can build strong on ongoingly. So I would love to invite you. I would love to invite you to join the Cultured Kids Club today. We don't open enrollment periods very often because we spend most of our time inside our membership creating incredible resources and lessons and really creating the best to serve our members. And so I would love to invite you to start today and teach your little ones a second language, whether you've started before or you are dipping your toe in and wanting to start maybe tomorrow. I know that it's actually going to build confidence in you, and it's going to help you actually start from the four walls of your own home. Or if you're wanting to do it in your preschool classrooms at preschool, I would love to invite you to be a member within our community. Now, the Cultured Kids Club, as I mentioned, is a monthly subscription service. And basically what that means is that we've created really affordable ways for you to be able to access our language lessons literally from all over the world. And so we've created 3 different programs that really have been designed to really set you up for a win. And as I said, every single lesson curriculum introduces all of our vocabulary through our language videos, our lesson plans, our activity sheets, and our flashcards. And so the main difference is that the Cultured Home, it provides 2 really in-depth language lesson plans a month. So you'll get language videos, 2 lesson plans, 4 activity sheets, and over 10 flashcards. And then we've created a separate homeschool program. And really, whether or not you're actually wanting to homeschool your child, this basically has been created because we know that there are some parents who want to run a lesson every single week, whereas the Cultured Home is really best created for a lot of our working parents who are really, really busy, but they know that they want to be able to run lessons semi-regularly as well. So you've got the 2 different options that we've created for you as well. The Cultured Homeschool, again, so every single month you receive 4 brand new lessons, include 4 lesson plans, 8 activity sheets, and over 20 different flashcards. And the Cultured Classroom is our specifically designed classroom program, which is designed for small groups. So whether you run a play group in your local library like I started, or whether you have your own studio, or whether you are an educator and you want to be able to introduce languages in your preschool, then this is a fantastic resource to be able to run as well. The beauty of it also is that you actually no longer need to worry about hiring external language programs to come in. And so it means that you can actually run language programs really, really easily, and it's really cost effective. So now all of your kids have access to a second language. And for our members who have who are wanting to sign up for the whole year, we do have that option available as well. And this actually gives you the ability to actually save significantly, which further reduces the price of our membership. So with the Cultured Home, that really is, you save 2 months worth of access to your language program. So the Cultured Home, instead of it being, oh, my math is fantastic. So it currently, I'm going to get my calculator because math was never my strong suit, languages was. So basically it was $228, and it now goes down to $190 if you register for the whole year. The Cultured Homeschool is, let me go and do that again. So that's $348 for our Cultured Homeschool program. That's actually going to be reduced down to $290, which saves you 2 full months. And the Cultured Classroom, that is over $1,548. That actually is reduced down to $1,290 as well. And so if you are doing the Cultured Homeschool, the Cultured Home, can you see how I get confused sometimes? If you are wanting to look into the Cultured Home program, that's less than $15 a month when you sign up for the full year program. And even with the Cultured Homeschool program, what does that come down to? It's crazy. The Cultured Homeschool program, it actually comes down to less than $24 a month. So it's less than $1 a day, if you think about it. But what it actually creates for your kids is actually something that's going to be incredibly significant, obviously, as we've discussed earlier. Now, This is an important part because some of you heard the idea of subscription or membership and you're freaking out. No, not at all. We don't have any locked in contracts. I honestly believe in what we've created so much that I actually know it's going to help you. And it's actually going to be something that you're going to want to be able to access regularly. So what I've created here to put everything at ease is the fact that you're protected by our Cultured Kid 100% satisfaction guarantee. And what that basically means is we give you, if you want to subscribe, you have 72 hours to explore your lessons inside the Cultured Kids Club. So there's no obligation. Within that 72 hours, you'll know pretty quickly if it's something that you think will be helpful for you. You can dig in, you can have a look at the lessons, you can look at the structure of how we do everything. And if you decide within that 72 hours that you are not interested or it's not really the right fit for you, and you'll know pretty quickly, you can let us know and we will just refund you your money, no questions asked. Now, if you decide to go with the month-to-month option, we have no lock-in contracts as well. So you can come, you can stay for 6 months. If you love it, great, keep going. If you decide, oh, we might need to pause it or cancel it at any time, you can shoot us an email and you can cancel anytime, because ultimately, we want to create something that's going to be super valuable for you and for your kids. And we know that things pop up, and we know that there are challenges that come along the way as well. So we have no lock-in contracts. And if you do the annual plan and you decide after 70 or before 72 hours it's not for you, no problems at all. But I think the reason I created that guarantee is really, I want you to be able to dive in and give it a try. I want you to be able to dive in and actually see how easy it can be. But to be honest, I just wish I had something like this back when I was starting to teach my own kids. And so for me, I remember the challenges of being able to start and not know all the words and the vocabulary. And I thought, you know what? If I can create something that would help another family or would help run languages in another preschool, then of course I want to be able to create something that's going to be helpful. And so I would love to encourage you to jump on in and register. And if you find it's not for you, no problems at all. Let me know. You can cancel it really, really easily. But yeah, we have that safety assurance there for you as well. Our members inside the Cultured Kid community really literally hail from all over the globe. We are, as I said, we're stay-at-home mums, we're homeschoolers, we're working mums, we're preschool educators, we're playgroup facilitators, we're dads who are diving in while mum's at work. Like, we are so passionate about our community. So uniting factor about all of it is that we want the very best for our kids. And that's the beauty of being able to connect literally all around the world, is that we actually, wherever we come from, whatever culture we've grown up in, the reality is we're actually very, very much the same all over the world, is that we want the best for our kids. And so I love that this unites all of us. These are my two, aren't they lovely? I think this is the only time they're actually really cuddling and smiling. No, they're actually best friends. But we want our kids to learn a second language. I want my kids to learn a second language, but more importantly, I actually want to build a strong foundation that will inspire a love of languages over a whole lifetime. And that's, for me, my dream for my kids as I continue down the language journey with you. We're all in this together. And so if we can create something that would inspire a love of learning, then my job here is done, right? We care, our team, we care about helping you give your kids the gift of a second language. And so regardless of whether you're fluent or not, if you want to give your kids a head start by teaching them a second language and enjoying every step along the way, then you're actually a lot like our Cultured Kid community already at heart. So we're all the same, right? The world over. Now, all that's left to do is to join us. We do have our enrollment open for 1 week. As I mentioned, we have 2 enrollment periods throughout the year. So we enroll in September and we also enroll in January as well. So once the doors close on Thursday, our team will really set to supporting our members and really building new lessons and new creative ways to engage your kids. So we won't be opening enrollment again until next year. So if this is something that you would be interested in checking out, I would encourage you to jump in today and have a look and let me know. I'm contactable at all times as well. So you can either DM us on Instagram or Facebook message us, or you can simply send an email to hello@theculturedkid.com. But I would encourage you to jump in and have a little bit of a look-see. But thank you. Thank you for spending some time with me today. I also want to show you a little bit of what the video lesson looks like and a little bit of behind the scenes of what the membership program looks like. So if you bear with me, I'm going to jump into a page here. And I want to show you here. So not many people get the luxury of being able to see behind the scenes. This is generally just for our members. But this is what you'll see once you become a member, and you will be able to log into your portal and you'll find that all of your lessons are in here. So as you can see, this is the Cultured Home, which is one of the parents programs. And you can see here, we have a Start Here program, Start Here, and this is where I share a number of different videos and ideas about how to get started, how to best use our resources, and really it's a great starting point to get familiar with our program. And then you can see here, these are all of our lessons. So as far as our lessons go, every month you will receive a certain number of new lessons. And then each month you unlock, or each week a new lesson will unlock, for example. So for example, right now these are the lessons that you'll be starting with. So you can see actions, animals, numbers. We have lots of them, and I'll show you inside behind the lesson as well. So you can see a little bit of the behind the scenes. So these are all of our colors, family. The internet is having a field day today. Family, food. We review all of our lessons to make sure that your child is actually picking them up, is actually getting some reinforcement as well. We do body parts, we do clothing. It's all here. So every week you'll get a new lesson that unlocks as well. So that way every week your language bank starts to expand as well. And so the beauty of that is that you don't need to feel the pressure to have to do every single lesson every single week. You may want to spend a couple of weeks on the one lesson alone. Even while the other ones add up, it just means that your language bank continues to expand. So that means that when you want to come and do a different lesson, you can go and choose from any of the other languages, any of the other lessons in your language bank. Things we've got clothing and the home and transport and nature and neighborhood. My kids make quite a number of appearances as well. You'll be pleased to see that's my little girl at school. So we have neighborhood, I said, school, and then these are some of the ones coming through, shapes and seaside. And then we had lots of fun filming. I basically had all of our friends saying, can my kids jump into your lessons? I went, absolutely. So feelings, birthday, Christmas, and these are the ones that they're going to be working on is all of our culture lessons. So I'll touch base on that one in a minute. But this is what I want to show a little bit of. So these are our video lessons. And so let me show you a little bit of this. So this is our French actions lesson. And all of our vocabulary is introduced through our video lessons. And as you can see, a lot of these characters are from our flashcards. So they're going to be really familiar to your children. They're going to weave in and through the lessons as well. So the kids are actually really familiar with them. Besides, kids love animation, but we've also included real life context. So this is all about actions vocabulary. And you can see we introduce all of our vocabulary through context. And you can see here we've included a short sentence as well. So your child knows that it's part of a bigger framework, and it also sees how it fits into a sentence. So this is our French lessons. Now I'm going to skip further forward. Okay, I'm going to skip a little bit further forward, and you can see we then continue to introduce our flashcards as well. So the beauty of this is that the flashcards are actually used to continually repeat new vocabulary words. And this is great because the kids have already seen the flashcards at the beginning of the lesson, so they're already very familiar with them as well. So this is just another form of repetition and also breaking up a little bit of our lessons. So every video lesson is about 5 minutes in length, and we do this so that the kids have a quick input and then they keep going with their lesson. This part is now it's your turn. What action is this? And so we do a call and response. And this is where the kids have seen a lot of these clips already. And so they've seen it, they've heard the vocabulary word, and this is their chance to guess what action it is. Beautiful. So I'll stop that there. Okay. And then I'll scroll down and you can see a little bit. This is what our lesson looks like. So we share a little bit of what's happening and things that you need to know. And then these are our lessons. So we do flashcards, lesson plans, lesson scripts, and our activity sheets. And so you can download all of these. Excuse the beeping, don't mind that. Always love a good beeping. So the lesson plan, you download your lesson plan and that comes up here. And the beauty of that is everything is digital. So you can actually download them, you can print them out, you can access them anywhere you are in the world. And our lesson plan includes what to do, what you're going to need for the lessons. So our lessons you don't need lots of extra things. You don't need to go and buy anything extra. We often include things that are around the home, very, very simple to have. And what to do before we play the video, what to do when you're playing the video, and what to do after the video is done. So we have flashcard reinforcements, we have games, multiple games that we play as well. And the beauty of this is, and this is a question we get asked a lot, is what happens if your children are at different ages? And so this is where it actually is a really helpful tool that you can see in every lesson plan. We've got an older children, so children who are 4 years and older, and children who are 4 years and under. And so we've created within our lessons a way to be able to engage your kids depending on how old they are as well. So that's helpful if you've got kids at home who are, for example, 6, and then kids who are 3, and you are able to engage with them and still be able to do the same lesson with them, but engaged in a different way. And the same thing goes that if you have different age groups in your preschool classroom, you can actually still use our lesson across the whole of your preschool. More games, and then we have an assessment. So it's a way for you to be able to know exactly what your child is doing, what they've picked up. For example, all of our flashcards are downloadable as well, and you can print them double-sided so that you can see them as well. So these are our French. This is the English and the phonetic, and then the French. So you can either print them out and hang them around your room, or you can keep them on tablets, or you can actually make them into flashcards as well. So that's one way that you can do it. As I said before, our lesson scripts are super helpful as well. And we include all of our French, all of our English, and all of our phonetic pronunciation. So that's super helpful too. And then last but not least, where is our activity sheets? We have the most beautiful little activity sheets, and it's a way that we've strategically tried to reinforce more vocabulary, but through repetition. And so we've used the images from our flashcards, as you can see. So this is our sleep in French flashcard. And the beauty of these is that we want to encourage our kids to say the word, to draw the word, and to trace the word. So depending how old your child is, they can just use it as a coloring sheet to reinforce what they've already seen. They can trace the outline of the word if they're a little bit older and are already starting to experiment with pencil grip as well. But we've included a couple of them as well. And so they're great tools to be able to reinforce all of the vocabulary once the lesson is done. And they want to just do some coloring and engagement as well. But the beauty of our lesson is that you actually... I'm going to come back to full screen in a second. The beauty of the lesson is that you actually don't need to be able to do everything. You can run these as often as you like. So if you want to run a lesson one a day, that's fantastic. If you want to run them once a week, that's fantastic. The resources mean that you can pick them up, you can take them anywhere, you can keep them on your tablets or really print them out, but they really are a helpful resource to be able to I'm just trying to get rid of this sharing screen. That's okay. To be able to be outworked with your child. So I hope that's been helpful for you today. Aside, that's all our lesson is for. I know we're coming close to actually wrapping it up today, but I would love to hear any questions that you might have. I know I mentioned we have, as I said, if you have any questions around cancellations, as I said, we have no lock-in contracts, no lock-in periods as well. And I guess with the annual subscription as well, you have 72 hours to get in, trial it out. And if you decide it's not for you, we completely refund your money back. But if you do have any questions, please feel free to get in touch. I hope this has been helpful for you today. As I said, enrollment will close in 1 week's time. So if you haven't had the chance to register for our program, make sure you jump in today and do so if you are looking at introducing French or Spanish to your children. Otherwise, that's all from me now, and I look forward to seeing you really, really soon. Have a great day. Bye.